It started quietly. Dalian Wanda, once the titan of Chinese real estate, sold off 48 Wanda Plaza shopping centers for 50 billion yuan, about $7 billion. But this wasn't just another distressed asset sale. It was a siren, warning that the very pillars of China's financial system were beginning to crack. In an economy where real estate accounts for nearly 30% of GDP, source duliogok.txt, a collapse in property isn't just bad news, it's existential. Dalian Wanda's $7 billion fire sale was a symptom. The disease ran deeper. China's real estate industry, long considered the engine of its economy, was collapsing under its own weight. Real estate accounts for nearly 30% of China's GDP, a staggering concentration of risk for any major economy. Developers were drowning in debt. Banks were heavily exposed, and the ripple effects were accelerating. New World Development's decision to delay a $77.2 million bond payment wasn't an isolated incident. It signaled a tightening noose around credit markets. Meanwhile, cracks appeared in the banking sector. In the first half of 2025 alone, 184 regional banks vanished, either through forced mergers or silent collapses. Behind closed doors, government regulators scrambled to stem the bleeding, but the losses were already baked in. The silent collapse of China's real estate giants and the quiet disappearance of regional banks pointed to a grim reality. The financial system wasn't just strained, it was fracturing. As the banking sector cracked, so did public confidence. For decades, Chinese savers had trusted their banks implicitly. Deposits were sacred, untouchable. But when banks started disappearing, that trust evaporated. Small regional banks, those closest to local economies, accounted for nearly 40% of total bank lending. Their sudden closures created ripple effects in small towns and cities. Businesses lost access to credit. Households found their life savings frozen. Loan defaults surged. In major cities, the damage was visible. Over 57% of real estate judicial auctions failed to attract a single bid. Streets once lined with construction cranes now stood eerily still. Empty apartment towers became symbols of excess and decay. Meanwhile, attempts to revive the market fell flat. Interest rates were slashed to historic lows. Mortgage restrictions were loosened, but buyers stayed away. The middle class, once eager to climb the property ladder, now saw real estate as a trap, not a treasure. And as real estate collapsed, the banks that funded it were dragged down too. What had once been China's golden growth formula, build, borrow, repeat, was unraveling. And with each failed auction and shuttered bank, it became clear. This wasn't just a downturn. It was a systemic unraveling. As the financial cracks widened, ordinary citizens felt the ground shift beneath them. In the once bustling suburbs of Guangzhou and Chengdu, middle-class families faced a grim new reality. They couldn't sell their homes. They couldn't refinance their loans. And they couldn't count on their banks. Official estimates place China's non-performing loan ratio at 5.3%, but independent analysts suggest the true figure may be double that. Banks, desperate to cover their losses, began quietly freezing large withdrawals. Customers were told to come back next week, again and again. Trust, the invisible glue holding the financial system together, was dissolving. At the same time, job losses mounted. The construction sector, long fueled by the real estate boom, hemorrhaged millions of jobs. For younger workers, the situation was even bleaker. Youth unemployment surged past 21%, a record high. A generation raised on the promise of upward mobility now faced a stagnant economy and a collapsing safety net. Empty storefronts, half-finished buildings, and shuttered banks dotted the landscape. The Chinese dream of prosperity was unraveling not through spectacular crashes, but through a slow, suffocating erosion. The collapse wasn't loud. It was quiet, and that made it all the more terrifying. Then, the inevitable happened. Major developers, already buckling under unsustainable debt loads, began missing more payments. Construction projects stalled indefinitely. Buyers who had prepaid for apartments were left stranded, with little hope of refunds. Meanwhile, banks found themselves trapped. With real estate assets depreciating and loans defaulting, balance sheets became a minefield. Local government financing vehicles, responsible for nearly $9 trillion in hidden debt, faced rising defaults, pushing municipalities toward fiscal collapse. Desperation replaced denial. Authorities quietly rolled out rescue plans, forced mergers of banks, backdoor bailouts, stealth injections of liquidity. But it was too little, too late. The once invincible Chinese growth model, built on borrowing, building, and banking, was imploding from within. And there were no easy fixes. No stimulus packages could restore broken confidence. No interest rate cuts could reverse the slow-motion collapse. The foundation wasn't cracking anymore. It was crumbling. And with it, the myth of China's economic invincibility. Beneath the surface, the crisis revealed a deeper flaw, one embedded in the DNA of China's financial system. For years, China's rapid growth was powered not by consumption or innovation, but by debt. Municipalities, developers, banks, all addicted to easy money. Local government financing vehicles, LGFVs, grew quietly, accumulating nearly $9 trillion in shadow debt hidden off balance sheets. At the same time, banks were encouraged to lend freely to fuel real estate expansion. Risk management took a back seat to GDP targets. The result was a sprawling financial web, opaque and fragile. When property prices soared, it seemed sustainable. But when the market turned, that web began to collapse. Developers defaulted. Banks pulled back lending. Local governments, deprived of land sales revenue, struggled to pay their bills. Desperate measures followed. Forced mergers between failing banks, disguised bailouts through state-owned enterprises, stealth credit injections by the central bank. But none addressed the core issue: a financial system bloated on debt with no easy way out. What made this crisis different was its invisibility. There were no Wall Street-style crashes, no dramatic bank runs. Instead, there was a slow bleed, trust quietly eroding, businesses quietly closing, hopes quietly dying. China's economy wasn't collapsing with a bang. It was sinking, silently, methodically, inevitably. The most dangerous collapse is the one you don't see. In China, there are no flashing alarms, no televised meltdowns, no Lehman moment, only silence. And in that silence, a financial system once hailed as a miracle is quietly unraveling. For decades, China's rise seemed unstoppable, an inevitable ascent to global dominance. But every empire faces its reckoning. The question now is not if China's financial house will withstand the storm. The question is, has the collapse already begun, and we're just too late to see it?